One of Magic's long-established characters, Karn, has been depicted, mentioned, and quoted in over 50 different cards and counting. The fan-favorite Golem was introduced in 1997 on the flavor text of several cards from the third set of Mirage Block, Weatherlight. As of this video, Karn has 5 unique printings. One is a special Vanguard card, a creature card, and 3 Planeswalker cards. In this video, we will go over those 5 cards along with Karn's story, so sit back, relax, as we get started with Magic's most beloved Golem, Karn. Way back during the day when Magic's main setting was the plane of Dominaria, a powerful planeswalker by the name of Urza was preparing for the imminent invasion of Yawgmoth and the Phyrexians. Urza built a time machine and needed a probe capable of surviving the harsh conditions of time travel. He discovered silver to be one of the only elements strong enough to withstand traveling through time. One of the cards to depict this moment in its artwork was Stroke of Genius, a powerful card that was a win condition during the days when Saga Block was legal and standard. With this discovery, Urza created a golem out of silver metal and gave it full sentience, allowing the construct to make its own decisions. At the Tolarian Academy, Urza entrusted one of his young promising students, Teferi, to teach the golem about the ways of life. However, Teferi took advantage of the golem's innocence and harassed it instead. Seeing Teferi's exploits, Joyra, a student from the land of Shiv, took the golem in. From there, the golem and Joyra became best friends, and it was Joyra who gave this golem its name, Karn, which means mighty in the ancient Thran language. During a Phyrexian incursion on Teleria, Joyra's life was taken by a Phyrexian agent named Kirik. In order to save her, Karn used Urza's time machine to travel back to when the incursion began. He succeeded in saving Joyra's life, but the time machine overreacted and destroyed most of Urza's academy. Years later, the Tolarian Academy was rebuilt. Urza had multiple projects to stop Yawgmoth and the Phyrexians. One of them was the Legacy. The Legacy was a collection of powerful artifacts and beings that had the power, when combined, to destroy Yawgmoth. The Weatherlight, a flying ship that could travel across planes, was the main vessel, and Karn was its master of engines. Both the ship and Karn were part of Urza's legacy. Joyra was the Weatherlight's first captain. Both the captain and the master of engines would go on several adventures aiding Urza's never-ending quests to stop Phyrexia. However, Joyra would later leave her position to travel to her homeland of Shiv. No longer being with Joyra, Karn's mental health slowly deteriorated as he became depressed. To aid the golem's depression, Urza removed Karn's memories of the past 20 years. However, to prevent himself from ever forgetting his best friend, Karn would say the words, "Joyra is my friend," every single day. The Vanguard version of Karn was the very first card to represent the golem. Printed in 1997, Vanguard was a supplemental set of oversized cards that featured iconic characters from Magic's lore. Vanguard was another option for players to play Magic differently. However, this variant of the game only lasted a couple of years, ending in early 1999. Although Vanguard featured Karn on paper for the very first time, the first official Magic card that represented Karn came from the set Urza's Saga. Printed in 1998, Karn Silver Golem, with its solid stats, quickly became a viable piece in several competitive standard decks. In fact, Karn Silver Golem was in a total of 5 decks that made the top 8 of a Pro Tour, including the 1999 World Champion deck piloted by Kai Bude, a 7-time Pro Tour champion. For 5 generic mana, Karn Silver Golem is a 4/4 artifact creature that gets -4/+4 whenever it blocks or becomes blocked. Also, For 1 generic mana, you may target a non-creature artifact, and it becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost until end of turn. These were very strong stats for a creature back then, and its unique abilities appropriately represent Karn's characteristics in Magic's story. The 0 attack and 8 toughness represents Karn's unwillingness to do harm to others, while the ability to create a non-creature artifact into a creature is one of Karn's many talents. Speaking of Magic's story, let's continue where we last left off. Many centuries after the destruction and restoration of the Tolarian Academy, Karn traveled to Benalia to watch over Urza's Bloodline Project. The Bloodline Project was a family line manipulated by Urza that lasted many generations to create the perfect human who could stand against the Phyrexians. The main protagonist of the Weatherlight saga, Gerard Capuchon, was the final product of the Bloodline Project and heir to Urza's legacy. As Karn watched over Gerard, Vuel, the son of Gerard's adoptive father, an eventual villain who went by the name of Volrath, abandoned his tribe and stole pieces of the legacy. Karn went to retrieve the stolen pieces, but was deceived into killing an innocent bystander. Then Vuel used the touchstone to freeze Karn. Many years later, Captain Sisse of the Weatherlight found the golem still frozen. When Gerard reactivated it, Karn instantly remembered his last moments before being frozen. Feeling an immense sense of guilt, Karn took a vow of pacifism, swearing to never kill again. When the Weatherlight traveled to the plane of Wrath, Karn was captured by the captain of the Predator, Grevin Ilvek. Taken to Volrath's stronghold, Karn was tortured by being forced to kill endless Mogg goblins, but was rescued by Gerard. Freed, Karn sought out the Sliver Queen to convince her to give him the missing legacy artifacts. The Golem succeeded, and the Weatherlight, along with its crew, escaped. After retrieving the rest of the legacy pieces from the plane of Mercadia, the Weatherlight traveled back to Dominaria, where Yawgmoth and the Phyrexians began their invasion. During one of the battles, Karn accidentally breaks the cap that Urza placed on his head. This released all the memories Urza had kept from Karn. Remembering the time he fought off the Phyrexians to save Joyra, Karn's vow of pacifism began to wane. After Gerard and Urza were taken prisoner to Phyrexia and escaped, Yawgmoth manifested himself onto Dominaria. The Coalition had to take drastic measures. First, the skyship Weatherlight released a blast of white mana to destroy the Phyrexian god, but to their dismay, Yawgmoth survived and the Weatherlight was destroyed. In a last-ditch effort, Urza tells Gerard the remaining secrets of the legacy weapon. Combining Urza's Power Stone eyes, Karn, the remaining legacy pieces, and himself, Gerard activates the legacy weapon, triggering a blast so powerful that it destroys the Phyrexians and Yawgmoth. However, Gerard and Urza perish in the process, and in the aftermath, Karn ascends, becoming the very first artificial planeswalker. Even though Karn had become a planeswalker, it wasn't until a decade later that we got the very first Karn Planeswalker card. Before we take a look at that card, let's first see what happened to our famed Golem after the Phyrexian Invasion. After the Coalition defeated Phyrexia, Karn created a new plane called Argentum, a metallic world of mathematical perfection. Argentum was Karn's new home. However, the Planeswalker had traveled back to Dominaria to train Jeska, a barbarian from the continent of Otaria, who recently ascended to a Planeswalker. Memnarch, Argentum's warden, watched over Karn's plane, but as he closely guarded Karn's domain, Memnarch accidentally contracted the Phyrexian oil that was left behind by the Planeswalker. The oil slowly corrupted Memnarch, making the warden obsessed in becoming a Planeswalker just like his creator. This led Memnarch to abduct lifeforms from other planes in hopes to find a unique individual with a rare Planeswalker spark. As countless beings were being transported onto Argentum, the plane slowly transformed into a new world Memnarch called Mirrodin. Eventually, Memnarch found an individual carrying a latent Planeswalker spark inside them. It was the elf Glissa Sunseeker. However, Glissa fought off Memnarch's attempts and defeated the tyrant. After Memnarch's defeat, Karn was able to return to Argentum. Upon his return, Karn saw his once perfect plane unrecognizable. As remnants of the Phyrexian oil splattered across the plane, it began to grow and corrupt many inhabitants. Mirrodin, now rife with Phyrexian influence, was primed for invasion. When the Phyrexians invaded Mirrodin, the Mirrans were quickly overwhelmed. Karn, along with most of the Mirrodin's inhabitants, were defeated and captured. During Karn's imprisonment, Phyrexia began to corrupt the Golem, enslaving his mind and body. Knowing they had to save Karn, the Planeswalkers Elspeth and Koth recruited a reluctant Venser, who was an old friend of Karn's from Dominaria, to help them rescue the Golem. They succeeded, but at the cost of Venser sacrificing his Planeswalker spark and life. With Karn completely freed and untainted by Phyrexia, he along with Elspeth and Koth attempted to fight off the Phyrexians, but they were too late. Mirrodin had already been under Phyrexia's control. Knowing their plight was futile, Karn and Elspeth abandoned the plane while Koth remained to continue the fight. The card, Karn Liberated, was the very first Planeswalker card to represent the popular character. Printed in New Phyrexia, Karn Liberated depicts the moment when Karn regains his sanity from Phyrexia's influence thanks to Venser's sacrifice. For 7 generic mana, Karn enters the battlefield with 6 starting loyalty and comes with 3 abilities. For +4 loyalty, target player exiles a card from their hand. For -3 loyalty, exile target permanent. And for -14 loyalty, restart the game, leaving in all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn Liberated and put those cards onto the battlefield under their control. Karn Liberated had some powerful abilities but did not see much success in Standard. However, in the modern format, the Planeswalker saw success in a deck called Tron. Having exactly 7 generic mana for its casting cost, Tron decks could play Karn Liberated as early as turn 3 thanks to its trio of Urza lands, which, by the way, is where the deck got its name. With Urza's Mine, Power Plant, and Tower in play, the Tron player could cast Karn Liberated, which would let them either remove a card from their opponent's hand or exile any permanent in play. They called this sequence Activating Voltron, which is a callback to the classic anime series from the 80s. Having a 7 mana Planeswalker out on turn 3 was extremely powerful, and many games were determined by that early play. The second Karn Planeswalker card came 7 years after New Phyrexia. It was introduced in 2018 from the acclaimed set Dominaria. For 4 generic mana and 5 starting loyalty, Karn, Scion of Urza, has a +1 loyalty ability that lets you reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them, and you put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. For -1 loyalty, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. And for -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token that gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Karn, Scion of Urza, saw more success in Standard than its predecessor, and it even sees an appearance in some Legacy and Modern decks. However, the third iteration, Karn the Great Creator, made an immediate impact in practically all formats including Vintage. Just like Karn, Scion of Urza, the Great Creator costs 4 generic mana and comes into play with 5 loyalty. It has a static ability that says, activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated. Its 2 loyalty abilities are +1, until your next turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. And -2, you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or in exile, reveal that card, and put it into your hand. Printed in 2019 from the set War of the Spark, the Great Creator's abilities are all extremely powerful in Vintage, due to the format being dominated by artifacts. One of its favorite combos to use is the -2 ability to fetch a Mycosynth Lattice. With Karn's static ability and Mycosynth Lattice in play, the opponent's battlefield would be completely locked up since all their permanents are artifacts. All 3 Karn Planeswalker cards are very unique and exemplify the character's rich history. They've all made an impact on the game in both competitive and casual formats. Now that we have looked at all of Karn's cards, let's finish telling the rest of the story. After regaining his Planeswalker spark, Karn traveled back to Dominaria to retrieve the Golgothian Silex, a powerful artifact from Dominaria's ancient past that destroyed an entire continent. Karn's goal is to use this artifact to destroy New Phyrexia, just like how his late creator, Urza, used it to defeat Mishra, who was Urza's brother and rival. Karn does find the Silex in the forest of Yavimaya, and also runs into the Gatewatch, a collective of planeswalkers determined to protect the multiverse from nefarious foes such as the Eldrazi. After the Gatewatch defeated the Elder Demon Belzenlok, Karn agreed to help them in their fight against the powerful Elder Dragon planeswalker known as Nicol Bolas. Jace alerts the Gatewatch on the whereabouts of Nicol Bolas, and they all planeswalk to the city plane of Ravnica. On Ravnica, Karn and the Gatewatch and many other planeswalkers battle Nicol Bolas and an army of undead. However, even with his unlimited power, the Elder Dragon could not defeat the Gatewatch and its allies. With Nicol Bolas defeated and his planeswalker powers removed, Karn joins the Gatewatch and continues his mission in destroying New Phyrexia. And this is where the story has left off. We know what Karn's next mission is, but how will it unfold? We hope this video gave you a newfound respect for Karn, and if you are already a fan of the Silver Golem, then we hope it gave you a nice tour down memory lane. This was Jonathan Beach voicing this video. If you enjoyed our episode, please support us by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel, and leaving a comment. We hope to see you again in our next video. Thanks for watching.